G'day, you're listening to the Big Breakdown podcast with Chris Stafford and Harrison Marshall. Take it away, fellas.
Hello and welcome along to episode 5 of the Big Breakdown podcast. We are halfway through our season 1 and we have a very exciting episode for you today. Just a reminder that at the end of episode 4, we launched our first competition. It's an opportunity for you to come online with myself and Harrison and write a mental model and performance model for your environment that's most importantly meets the wants and needs of the participants as well as sort of your coaching vision as well. And we'll be launching that in the next couple of episodes, but you can access that via the link, which we'll add on to the video on YouTube and down in the description on Apple, Spotify, and all the other platforms as well. Harrison, how are you?
Good. I'm excited. Big Boris has helped us out. We're coming out of lockdown. Hopefully, it's a summer full of merriment. Canny way.
It is exciting that we can finally get out and enjoy ourselves. And rugby is returning, which is also.
You can actually coach. You can actually do some coaching.
Can't wait. It's been a year.
Yeah, I know that you've been biting at the bullet, and fingers crossed, you'll be out there back on the training paddock.
Hopefully, we can get some actual coaching videos out on the YouTube channel as well. I do think it's important to sort of point out that all the other episodes that we've recorded so far have been well before a ball was kicked in the Guinness Six Nations. Is there anything that's stood out for you at the moment, Harrison? Anything that's been a key talking point?
Well, there's certainly been a lot of balls being kicked, especially from England. Key talking points. I think the first round performance from Scotland really stood out for me. I think England got a lot of hard time over that, but I think you've got to credit the Scots where it's due. I thought they showed up at Twickenham. They were ready for that game. They brought an intensity which England just couldn't match, and there was some superb displays out there.
I think on that as well. I think if Finn Russell and Hogg haven't got a place on the plane, not that they might be travelling anywhere for the Lions, but a place in the Lions squad, I think if they're not already in there, as it would be a travesty. I think.
A place on the plane? Are you working with Anton Deck on Saturday Night Takeaway?
Yeah. Favorite moment of the week.
Yeah, no, I agree. They should be. They've got to be in Lions contention, especially for a starting 15 jersey if they continue the way that they're playing. In terms of other key performances, I think France for me have come firing out the blocks. I think that Sean Edwards is a signing in 2020. He's taken that French team not just defensively, but just I think their mentality is completely shifted, and they're actually looking like a bunch of winners, and they're so young as well. Antoine Dupont just is setting the world alight, and for me, they're my favourites at the moment currently for the 2023 World Cup in Francais.
Yeah, they have. They've been playing some very good rugby, and I actually hope they don't go very typical French and just before the World Cup start to implode a little bit, because I think Edwards has completely brought a new dynamic to that French team, which I think is something that is definitely lost from Wales at the moment. If you look at sort of how they've played, I mean their top player and probably until the weekend was the red card.
Yeah, well, that's just it's credit where credit's due. Wayne Pivac, picking. I've not done it before. I've not known many other coaches do it before, but picking front rowers that you want to ram their shoulder into their face on several occasions and get the other team sent off. This inspired selection. It truly is, and and then hiring a French referee that seems to have come from the Welsh Federation as well it's not been seen before in international rugby before. It's not been seen before in international rugby, and I think credit where credit's due with Wales, and they have played some decent rugby. I don't want to be too harsh on them.
I think they have definitely got some candidates for the Lions shirt. I think it's important to point out that although there were a lot of issues at the weekend, everything that's come from that in terms of the death threats for players and referees, everything that's just not acceptable. It's just not part of rugby, and I think the people that are making these threats are not the sort of people that will be able to go out and actually play in that game anyway. So, let the lads do the job. I think we all are aware that England aren't at their best at the moment. There's something just not right about them. But Wales were the better side, and even if you took away them controversial moments, Wales potentially still could have won the game.
Potentially, we never would have known. I do think England did show signs of improvement. I thought their attack massively improved on. They just showed that continuity of their attack. I think key decisions or key bits of skill in those key moments really let them down. I think, but that's going to come. You're going to get that with, he's stuck with his guns. He's stuck with those Saracens players that haven't played since the autumn. They're going to be a bit ring rusty. So, but they're still world class players. We just got to give them time.
Yeah, I think that's the key. When England had the ball in hand, they played some really good attacking, fast rugby. They shipped the ball around and were a threat, and there were some really good tries scored in that point. I think the main issue is, like you've just sort of alluded to, is that the lads haven't played, and I don't think they're just fully engaged with how the referees are interpreting the breakdown with the new COVID restrictions and everything else. I think it will come. I think it's definitely not. There's still plenty of time till the World Cup for England to sort of turn it around, and there's loads of lads within that, like you say, that are world-class players who can bounce back from these setbacks.
Oh, definitely. And I think I understand Eddie Jones's idea for why he's playing these Saracens players. I think it'd be harsh not to select them. They're not currently playing. This is their opportunity to try and get them on that Lions tour as well in the summer, because they're not going to get that. They're not going to get that same intensity, unfortunately, in the Championship than you are in the Six Nations. So, he's trusted these players. Let's trust Eddie. He's got England to a World Cup final before. We can question all his decisions and everything, but he's got to 2 World Cup finals. How many other coaches have done that, barring the New Zealanders, of course, who seem to get there everybody 4 years?
Yeah, they don't count. I suppose. Then the other talking point is the relegation potential, because we all know the Italians are just happy to turn up and be there. I think they've played there's 2,191 days since maybe more now, since they last won a game in the Six Nations. There is a fair argument that Georgia should really be maybe given an opportunity. What do you think on that?
Well, Chris, in the first 5 minutes of this episode, you've upset the French and the Italians. So I think it's pretty clear what you voted for on Brexit. But no, those questions are always going to linger there. Those questions are always going to be there. 2015 it's a long time now since they last won the Six Nations. Do I think Georgia should have a go? We've got to ask yourself, why not? Why not? They did some good stuff. They did some good stuff in the Autumn Nations Cup. But then there's compelling arguments of both sides, and I'm sure the couple of Italian lads that I coach, they'd be sorely upset.
Oh yeah, and it would change the dynamic having that relegation sort of threat in there, and it would change the how maybe they'd approach the game, might bring that little bit more of more excitement to the game. I think that's sort of a good point to really start moving on to our episode now. We've got a great guest. This week we've got Andy Plimer from the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. Andy is Director of Coach Development at Montreal Irish, as well as Defence Coach. He also coaches Concordia University Women's Rugby. He holds a Bachelor of Education in PE, World Rugby Level 3 qualified, and has completed his NCCP Competition Development Award. He has 15 years coaching experience across age grade programs in Canada with under-17s, regional under-19s, and Quebec under-20s and senior men's, as well as the minis to under-9s following the kids through. He started the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast in 2015 and has interviewed some of the rock stars of the rugby coaching world, from Eddie Jones, Michael Cheika, Stuart Lancaster, to name a few. And he joins us today to chat about some of the content from his interviews and how he's put it into practice. Andy, how are you?
Good, mate. You're one of the rock stars too, don't forget. You were on.
Yes, I was. Yeah, so, back in 2019.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It was an interesting one, chatting about Old Atlanteans and the stuff that me and Harrison did there.
Yeah, I learned to pronounce it too, so that was good.
Yes, that took a couple of takes.
Sure did. Yeah,
one of the few is I think that's the best thing about people talking about Atlanteans is just hearing them trying to pronounce it.
Yeah.
So Andy, thanks for coming on. Really, really.
Yeah, no worries.
If you just start off first of all about your backstory from playing to coaching and how you ended up in Canada as well. I think that'd be
Yeah. Well, for playing, I grew up in Newcastle in Australia, which is a rugby league heartland. So I was playing rugby league from about 8 until 18. And to be honest, I hadn't really even heard of rugby union. I'd heard of it, obviously, but I'd never really watched it. I watched a few games where Campo ripped it up. But that was about it. I wasn't a really big rugby fan. And then I went to university. My first year of university, I was still playing rugby league in my under 18s club. And then all my mates at uni were like, they all came from the country and they all kind of were rugby guys. And they all said, why are you playing league? So the following year, I joined Newcastle University Rugby Club and loved it. Had a first game, was in 5th grade, and it was back in the day where I was a winger and I had a bit of toe. Got over the line a few times and I was hooked ever since. And then I played for, I didn't play consistently. Like throughout my childhood, I'd play a couple of seasons and then, I grew up surfing and I grew up skateboarding and, all those kind of things. So I was kind of dipping in and out of all of those, which probably was a good thing because I ended up playing till I was 40, which I don't think I would have done if I played every season. And the same happened when I started playing union. I got a knee injury that I finished that season. Then I didn't go back the following season. I was playing in a band, all that kind of cool stuff that you do when you're carefree and 19 years old. And then I came back into rugby, a couple of years later, and then kind of got pretty hooked. Played for another club in Newcastle, Hamilton, and then I went overseas, did the usual Aussie backpacker thing, and ended up in London. Lived in North London in Clapton, in Hackney, played for Hackney Rugby Club for a couple of seasons, not full seasons again, kind of in between trips to Central America and the Walkabout Hotel. I'd managed to fit in a bit of rugby in there as well. And then I went back to Australia, got fully into it again and played a little bit of rep when I moved over to Adelaide. And then Canada was I went to Canada in 2003 to play, snowboard and play. And then that's where I met my now wife, Jen. She was playing in the women's team in the club that I joined, the Montreal Irish. And then I went back to Australia. We did a bit of long distance for a year. And then I moved back permanently in 2007. And that's actually where my coaching started. I was player coach for the Montreal Irish for 3 years. Easily the toughest introduction to coaching you could ever ask for to be a player coach.
We spoke about that on the episode that I was on as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yours, because I had the similar thing that I found it quite difficult.
Yeah, for me, I'm pretty hard on my sleeve kind of character. Like so, my phys ed background really helped me in terms of structuring the sessions, and I had a vague understanding of games-based practices, and just knowing how to get people moving and making sure everyone's active and you're not talking too much, and that people are actually moving in some kind that kind of looks like rugby, I suppose. But it was more I wasn't skilled enough in managing, especially on game day. I wasn't skilled enough on managing my emotions and managing my team and working with my captain and working with the referee. So yeah, it was very, very challenging. But in a funny way, I wouldn't change it because it actually expedited some of those areas for me, because I got to points in my coaching as a player coach where I'm like, okay, this is not working. I had enough kind of self-awareness to realize some guys weren't having fun. And in my second year of coaching as a player coach, I really changed a couple of ways I was doing things. And it definitely helped moving forward. Yeah. So I can talk about that later if you want, but yeah, to finish off the coaching from the club coaching, I then started getting into some rep coaching. with some underage Quebec teams, and then some regional, like you said in the intro. I did 5 years with Rugby Canada's U17 program, which, I was only involved, 6 weeks of the year with that. And then now I'm kind of went back to Montreal Irish for some head coaching stuff there for a couple of years, and now I'm coaching the women's team at Concordia University. This is my second year doing that. We really only got one season with them because of COVID, and I'm also doing the coach development stuff with my club. More out of wanting to give back to the club and not being able to go to trainings every Tuesday and Thursday night because the kids are playing sport and I want to be there for that.
No, I think that certainly sounds very interesting, and I think I think experience counts for a lot, especially with coaching. I think with the wide experiences that you've experienced there. In terms of like going to different countries around the world, I know that rugby is the same wherever you go. Did you feel that there were major differences in terms of how the game is perceived and how they're coached differently in those different environments? And do you think that's kind of impacted you as a coach?
Yeah, I suppose. Well, speaking for Canada, that's probably the one I've got the most experience in. I actually came over. I was at that first time coming over. Oh, this is how we do it back home. That kind of jerk that no one wants at their rugby club. But I learnt really quickly. There's some freaking good rugby players floating around in club level, and like rugby in Canada's got a 100-year history. So anyone who's traveling and going to play or coach, I would just strongly encourage them to just listen and observe and be cognizant that there's people on the ground that really know what they're talking about. So don't take that for granted. And the other thing that I notice in Canada is they love tackling. They actually don't call it tackling; they call it hitting. So that gives you a bit of a indication on their mindset. And I suppose it comes from their national sport, two national sports, lacrosse, but hockey. And a lot of the people growing up, the guys, because there's no women's football, will play football in the fall. But yeah, they love the contact part of it. And if you ever saw any of the heyday of Canadian rugby, in the Al Sharon kind of Gareth Rees years, they were some tough, nasty men floating around in that group, and they really pride themselves on that. So,
well, I think
as a coach, that's a challenge too, because sometimes you gotta let them off the leash, and other times you gotta go, whoa, we're not doing that today, and we're not ready for that today.
Yeah, and I think the first player that comes to mind is Jamie Cudmore, bringing
100%,
that in Europe.
Just a beast.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think that some of the stuff he's, in terms of the contact side is phenomenal. I think we've experienced at Beckett as well. We had a second row that's he's just finished his 3 years here from Canada and has just gone back to the MLR. Who's, once again loves that physical side. But it's like you said, there's the national sports that that are fueling that. And in terms of like your coaching experiences within Canada, then I know you've got, listening to you and reading your biography, you've got quite a wide range there. And we recently spoke with Stuart Dixon, who worked with the DMPM Sharks women's team here as well.
Yeah.
How's it been coaching the women? And and how much has that kind of influenced your coaching ideology and how you kind of approach it?
Yeah, it's been really cool, actually. I'd always in my back of my mind, I want to coach women at some stage. One for professional growth as a coach, but also I've got 2 girls of my own and a young son, and I'm going to be coaching them at some stage. And so, I want to be match ready, if you will. I went in coaching women thinking there'd be a lot of differences, and reflecting on that, there are not many differences. And the differences that do exist are actually really cool and actually beneficial, and put them ahead of men in ways to develop as a team and a sense of togetherness and those kind of things, which is sometimes really hard to pull out of guys. They're athletes. They want to perform. They want to get better. They want to work hard. So zero difference there. Definitely, they will challenge you, And I kind of knew that going in because I'd had a chat to a few coaches in the past about it. And I really like that because if they're kind of like kids when you're hungover, your own kids, they know, and they go at you and they're relentless. And if the women think you're trying to like talk your way out of a situation and that you're not actually prepared, they'll take you on and they'll question you. And so that really helps in terms of just making sure you are on top of everything, that your philosophy is really rock solid, because if they question it, you fall back on that, that your sessions are obviously planned really well, those kind of things. And then the other thing that they like, for motivating them, you can walk into a change room with guys and motivate them from a physical standpoint. You want them to go out and just smash the opposition, and you can get them pretty jazzed up about that fairly easily and fairly quickly. The caveman DNA kicks in, and off you go. You've done a great job. And again, I'm only 2 years in, so my experience is limited, but I've found that women don't really respond to that they like doing it. They definitely like going out and, smashing the opposition, but it's not their driving reason. I've found that they more want to go out to play for each other and to be a really tight group and show each other how much they work well together and show the opposition that. So that's been a really good one. And I think I'm working under Jocelyn Barrio, so I'm working with a female head coach, which is also awesome. She's a total legend in this area. She's been kind of at it for 20 years, and she's probably put more national women onto Canada's 7s and 15s team than most people in this country. And she's just relentless, and like, she's got a drive to push this team forward. And yeah, I'm learning a ton from her as well. So yeah, it's been great.
So just some great stories then, and that does kind of mirror up to what Stuart spoke about as well, and from my experience that I shared in that episode as well, from coaching some of the girls that are now in the England team. It's that always they don't do it. It's not being awkward. It's just that reason why are we doing this, and you've got to really have that rationale and know why yourself. And I found that I planned a lot better then, and I was more like I said, fully aware of what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. So just on that then, just give us a sort of a brief overview of your early coaching experiences, what they looked like. You've sort of said how teaching helped with that a little bit. And then just talk about the motivation for setting up the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast, because since that was one of the main podcasts I used to really listen to up until sort of now the High Performance podcast. I bounce between both of them, but it'd be really interesting to go through sort of the start journey of that as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I started teaching the same way as I started coaching. Just come in all guns blazing. This is how we're doing it. Hyper strict, borderline dictatorial. And my first teaching experiences were in North London, and I learned really quickly in North London that you're just another adult in their life, yelling at them if you're coming into a classroom like that. That I learned that really quickly because I got immediate feedback. So I probably changed my teaching style a lot faster than I changed my coaching style. But there were a couple of moments where, especially in my second season as a player coach, where myself and controlling my emotions towards my teammates on the field was a big factor that I had to fix. So we were halfway through the season. We won a game away, and we grinded it out. It was pretty awful rugby. And there was two moments in that game that I remember like it was yesterday. One, my scrum half, I was playing 10. My scrum half is probably one of the best rugby players I've ever played with. Halfway through the game, had a few suggestions, and I screamed at him, "It's not a democracy." So that can we laugh about. We're still mates today, so water off a duck's back kind of thing. And this is 12 years ago. So that kind of puts you in the mindset of where I was at. And then after the game, we'd won the game, like I said, and then I'm leaving, and I see one of the club legends, tight head prop, leaving the ground, leaving the parking lot. Said see you later to him. He barely said anything to me, and he just looked miserable. He looked like totally done. And I'm like, I had a 2-hour drive home by myself, so a lot of reflection time. And I'm like, oh man, I got to change. This is not working. And I think one of the first things that I did, the big change for me was reading the book Any Given Team, and by Ray McLean. If anyone's looking for work on building culture and empowering players, that's the book to start with. And I read that, and I basically did a 180 on everything I was doing, and didn't happen overnight, obviously. But I really chipped away at, firstly, acknowledging my faults to the team and showing that I was fallible and that I've made mistakes, and the potential is I will make mistakes again, but I'll always admit them and I'll always apologize for them. That was big. And then secondly, just handing it over to the players in terms of creating a trademark, listing a set of behaviors that they want to show that are measurable to be true to that trademark, and then peer reviewing on a weekly basis around, are you achieving your trademark? Are you living it, or are you not? And there's some really cool processes you can go through on that to get open, honest feedback in a safe environment where no one's justifying bad behavior, coach included. And even halfway through season 3, we actually had a coach peer review session. And one of the rules for peer review is you can't justify, if you're being peer reviewed on a negative trait, you can't justify it. You just have to take it and realize that it's affecting a teammate and that you have to modify it in some way. And I remember we were being peer reviewed in a pub. No alcohol at this stage, but at the end we had a few beers. But during the work part, my assistant coach was being peer reviewed, and he was being called up on something that the player, can't remember what it was, but being called up, and he started justifying it. And one of the other players stood up and said, no, you're not allowed to justify. You're being peer reviewed here. And I thought that was pretty awesome. And he had to just bite his tongue and take the feedback. And because if you justify, you're just going to repeat it, right? So, but if you don't and you listen to that feedback, it has to buzz around in your head for a while, and you have to reflect on it. And
I think that's really
change.
Really good way, because one of the things that I think coaches are quite guilty of is that self-reflection and understanding self. And sometimes you need to be made aware of some of these things to actually, like you say, be able to correct it, action it, and bring it to the front of your mind so that you're aware that you're doing it.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing, Ray McLean also, he was the first one to kind of create the leadership group, which is, can be a buzzword, but if it's used properly, it's very powerful. They can be your voice, but they can also be the player's voice to you. If the players aren't happy with a way that you're doing things or behaving or structuring or attack, defense, technical, tactical, whatever, they can come to you. They're empowered to come to you like almost immediately, rather than letting it fester and rot for 6 weeks and having disgruntled players who don't want to play for you or for each other. So yeah, it's really important to have that full open loop where players can, it might be a new player or a quiet player who doesn't want to speak up or express, or it's not in their nature to do that. So creating some avenues for them to do that is a good way. I also like using Google Forms for that as well. Anonymous Google Forms can really pull out some interesting information, because often people are more comfortable typing down their answers rather than having a chat. So yeah, that's definitely important to get that feedback as a coach, because we've all made that mistake. We just grind through and wait for that end of season survey. It's too late then. Like you go, if there were things that you could fix, it's gone. You've missed that opportunity.
Oh, I think that's massive, and I think it comes down to it's trust, really. And it was picking up on talking about as a coach, we've got to show that human side, because I think that's what really builds that trust between, first of all, you and a player, and then also the players with each other, because they know that they're in this. It's a journey. The season is always going to be a journey.
Yeah.
And the players have got to trust you as a coach for you to take them on that journey. And I think there's some good ideas there of I think would help really benefit the listeners in terms of their coaching practice and in that self-reflection, and how how that trust can be built with the players. So I think there's some nice stuff there.
Yeah, the human side is really important, especially in teaching as well. Teaching and or teaching is coaching, vice versa. I'm a bird watcher, so I'm like a little bit crazy about twitching, and like all my players know it. And in the middle of a practice session, I'll identify a bird as it flies over, and just to take the edge off, or they're like some new players are like, "What the hell just happened there?" And it's just I do it partly for that reason, is for them to realize like I'm a human being. I'm not a robot. We can have fun. You can take the piss out of me too. I love it because it's the highest form of flattery, apparently. And yeah, so it's really important to do that as a coach. You can't be standoffish. You can't be the know-it-all. And players need to know that. But you also got to have a line as well. But
Oh yeah, and that's I think it's a difficult balance that I think a lot of coaches, especially I think younger coaches, they come in here with I think when you're starting your coaching journey, you've got all these ideas in your head, and I think you've mentioned it within your journey that you want to imprint these ideas out, but then actually the experiences that you get working with probably lots of different environments, actually you start to refine those, and that's when you talk about building culture. Yeah, and showing those vulnerabilities for those players to actually get on board that journey.
Yeah, and culture's an important one because it's one of those. I grind my teeth to dust when I hear interviews about, we've got a good culture and stuff like that. It's like every team's got a culture. Some of them are just really garbage, and that's the culture of that team. And it's just, is it the culture that you want as a coach to experience and for your players to experience? Because I think we've all been in those teams where there's the cliques and there's a couple of guys in the team that you just wouldn't hang out with them if they weren't in your team. And I think there's a real skill and a real art to doing that, to getting those people rowing in the right direction, even if they don't like each other, because you can't like everyone, and being able to work together really well. And I think that was, one of my guests, Michael Cheika, on the podcast, that was definitely one of his strengths, was getting everyone in a room, getting them all pointing in the same direction, and come hell or high water, they're going to fight for each other. So yeah, it can't be underestimated. And we've also been in those teams where it's like, okay, we've got the bit of butcher's paper here. We're going to write down all the awesome things we're going to do this year, stick it up on the wall. That's it. You never refer to it again throughout the whole season. Then you walk into the changing rooms, you're like, oh yeah, shit, we're meant to be doing all this stuff here. And so it can't be just like a one-off session. It has to be every session. Every time you get a chance to mention the trademark, the behaviors, you peer review it every session. I don't like doing post-game stuff. I don't think that's often a good area to do, but you're constantly talking about what your team culture is, what you guys decided the team culture was, so that it's never just a bit of paper on the wall. It's a living thing.
That kind of links into the stuff that Matt Bennett spoke about on one of your episodes as well. He talked about it was the acceptable, and
unacceptable. Yeah, very, very similar. Yeah, and I get a little bit out of every episode, every guest, and yeah, Mark's got a process that definitely works, and it just comes down to what fits for you. I really like the Ray McLean method, and I've modified it to fit for my context. And I've used a lot of Mark's stuff too. I kind of just piece it in there. So yeah, but getting resources from all voices is really important. And then it's just up to you to form what that opinion and that philosophy around team culture that works for you.
I think that's an important point, because I think if you can create a culture in one environment, but that might not be exactly replicated in another one. I think that's
100%.
I think we've got to be really careful with that. And we've discussed it within the first few episodes about actually when we're understanding our who, and when you go into a new environment, it's it might take a bit longer in different environments. We don't know, but you've really got to understand who you're working with, both the players and then the fellow coaches you might be with, before you actually can implement a culture. And it might be what I do here is completely different to what I do over there. But it's got to be what works for who in that environment.
Yeah, 100%. Knowing that playing group, what they want. Do they actually want that, or do they just want to rock up, have a game and a few beers afterwards?
exactly.
It's key. Yeah.
So that sort of brings on really to the next bit around that understanding the who. And you've obviously worked with age grade players, school players, all the way up to sort of the adults. What have you got any good examples of where you've understood the who in that environment? So what you do in a school to maybe what you do in an adult environment to work out them wants and needs and how you then action that.
Yeah, I probably a couple of ways I've done it. Again with Google Docs, Google Forms. Pre-season, I started doing this about 6 years ago with my high school team. I don't coach high school anymore because I moved to a college. But I started 6 years ago asking a few questions, and I changed the questions every year, but basically getting the why out of them. Why are they playing? And the answers came through like I knew they would. They're not playing for winning. These are 16-year-old kids. Okay, they're not playing to win. 2 kids out of 55 in my first time said they want to win a championship, and it was like their third choice. The rest of them were, I want to learn new sport. I want to get fit. I want to make new friends. I even want to make new friends with the opposition, which I'm like that one I wasn't I wasn't sold on, but good for you. But it was all about the connections and learning a new sport and having fun. And so as a coach, I read that it's now my duty to provide that environment for them, because if I provide the environment that I think they want, that's not what they come for. And end of the day, we're going to get players who don't actually like rugby and don't continue playing rugby. And in a country like Canada, like we can't have that. We've got to bring all players in, because we're competing with just some mega sports. Doing the same thing for senior men, you'll get winning starts to creep in. Definitely, they want to win, they want to train, they want to go out and they want to win, and they want to win a championship. But still, there's this underlying current of, we want to be a tight team. We want to represent the club. I want to get better as a player because I want to play for the provincial side. Those kind of things. So again, you got to cater for that environment, but it's fun. They do want fun. They do want an enjoyable environment, because man, the rugby world is littered with coaches and players who are just not enjoying what they're doing. Like you just have to, lift under the surface and have a look to see, you've got coaches out there who, their marriages have failed. They're working 80 hours a week. They're kind of dragging themselves to practices. There's players and coaches with mental wellness issues. So we can really go too deep into the, win at all costs mindset. And I've done it before. I know that it's a slippery slope. But I think getting the getting the who sorted first, and then actually listening to it and realizing, hey, I'm in a service here. My job is to serve, is really important.
I think some players, especially in the community game, that they come into the rugby side of things for the release of the day-to-day life.
100%, yeah.
They just come down, have a run around with the mates, and have a few beers afterwards, and it's tailoring that wants and needs to then it can allow you to shape the structure and the sessions that you then deliver. Yeah,
they're getting away from the boss who's been a prick to them all day. They don't need another boss doing the same to them for 2 hours as well. So we play a really important role there.
So how have you found managing a group of athletes? Who have you ever had ones where they're just completely very different ends of the spectrum? Because I know that I've spoken to coaches over here that have had players who just want to be there for a bit of fun, but then there's also players that they want the winning is their be all and end all. How have you kind of managed that within your environments?
Yeah, it's pretty common in Canada, to be honest, because I would say, the first 15 team of the high school I was formerly at was grade 10, grade 11. And I would say of those kids, you're often getting over 50% have never played rugby before. And then you've got some kids who have been in the national U17 team. And then you've got some kids who have played club rugby since they were in, grade 6, grade 7. So it's always a real hodgepodge of, you know, players and expectations and those kind of things. I think that going back, like I could talk about team culture all day, but going back to creating that trademark, understanding what they want first. They want fun. They want to learn a new game. They want to find new friends. But then creating that team culture, that have the players create that culture of what's expected, what do they expect of each other, so that the first time a player is getting stuck into a guy who knows nothing about the game, that player gets pulled up by another player, or you initially, slow transition, to say, hey, is this trademark behavior that's going on here? And then immediately you've redirected them into what they want to do as a team. The other way, in terms of the skill disparity, I love what Rusty and Fletcher are doing with the Magic Academy. I think there's some really good stuff you can do there around challenges and just individual challenges. And so pick the kid who is, you know, win at all costs and a gun, and penalize him 5 times, or tell him, okay, now you have to, he might be a second row, now you have to go play fullback. Or the kid who can't pass off his left hand, I'm going to give you a point for every time you try and pass off your left hand. So I think that's what they've done is, you know, they've really, you know, from a teaching standpoint, it's individualized learning, and doing that on the sporting field, you can absolutely do it. Just exploring it and trying it and making a bunch of mistakes. But you'll never have a team that's all really good, and you just have to, like, here you go and play. You're always going to have those challenges, whether it be senior men, high school kids, or even, that was probably the biggest mistake I made when I first started with U17 with the Canada team. I was like, these guys are going to be guns. And then after my first 2-week camp, I'm like, holy crap, some of these kids don't even know how to play the game, because they're super new at it. And there's professional rugby players who don't know how to play the game. So I think, making sure you go in like really aware that you're going to have players of various levels, no matter what level you're at, is important.
Yeah, I think that's a really important, because if we've not stretched players during a coaching session, then we've not really done our job as coaches. We should be there to help the strugglers and the strivers to become better from a differentiation point of view. So I think that sort of comes in nicely to the next bit around sort of, you've interviewed coaches from international.
I'm an influencer. Let's not lie. Come on. I'm a YouTube sensation, even though I don't have a YouTube channel.
I thought we saw you on the beaches of Dubai.
Yeah.
So you've obviously interviewed all these people from different levels of the game, from international coaches down to like little old me. What have the big takeaways been from them interviews in terms of influencing how you understand the game, and then what you actually coach from that?
It's hard to really pinpoint that. When you sent that question to me, I'm like, this is really hard, because I don't mean to sound like all fluffy here, but every person I have on the podcast, I'll get something out of them that I will apply, or it'll be counter to what I would apply, and I'll then think, you know, I'm doing it for this reason, not for that reason. Like, you know, when I interviewed you, for example, the mental model, I already had one kind of tucked away in Google Drive somewhere, but talking to you in that interview really emphasized, man, I gotta really tighten this up, and it's got to be a living document for the players. And I like team culture. I've got to be talking about this every week, every session. So, you know, as simple as that. And then, you know, there's some rock star moments with Eddie and Stuart Lancaster and Checks, as I call him. I'm allowed to call him Checks now.
That's nice.
And I've just been a bit of a fan for those ones. But there have been like some total revolutionary moments, like Richard Cheetham was a big one for me. Rusty was a big one for me. Don't tell him. I got to get Fletch on because he'll probably do a better job than Rusty. But they were big ones. They were the ones that really just kind of I don't want to say revolutionized, but really changed what I was doing from a pedagogical standpoint. There's been I like geeking out on the coaching science as well. So what is the, in terms of skill acquisition, what are the research-based methods that we can apply in our practices that have proven to not only increase skills but retain those skills? Because if we're running a practice session and we're not retaining skills over a long period of time, we may as well have played ultimate frisbee. And actually, if we played ultimate frisbee, maybe they would have got better. So I think that's incumbent of coaches to know this stuff. So people like Mark Upton, total like underrated legend in this area. Nick Winkleman does some really cool stuff. He's with the IRFU on the language we use, and when we're giving coaching cues, are we using an external or an internal focus? Richard Shuttleworth, he's he's big on the constraints-led approach and the dynamical system theory. So understanding what that means is really important as well. And then I suppose like the big ones for me for playing style, I mentioned Lancaster, Eddie, but having Jim Mackay on from the Reds was really cool, because that was like, okay, this is a guy who's at the professional level. He's coached for Australia. He's now attack coach for the Reds, and he is coaching on such a like a coaching philosophy is just, that's what drives him. So he is all about the principles of play in rugby, and every session he has them playing, it is based around the principles of play. His attack structure is super simple and based around the principles of play. And now, if you watch the Reds now, after I think he's been there 3 years, their offloading game that they are now playing, they are frighteningly good. And I just love watching them. I just like Aussie rugby. I'm not a parochial fan for any team except for the Wallabies. But what the Reds are doing, it kind of just reaffirmed to me that, okay, principles of play, super important. Same with someone like Pierre Vilpero, talking to him. The way they look at the game and coach the game is so simple. And it's based around core principles that never change, no matter what. And that is how they base their practice sessions and their attack or defensive structures around it.
I think that was my biggest takeaway. I watched the Reds Waratahs game from the first weekend of the Super Rugby just gone. One of the lucky few in the UK, because I know there's big dispute on that at the moment.
We won't ask Harrison how you got that, but carry on.
No, so I think what you said there, I think for the Reds especially, I think that it was very simple. A lot of run hard, run straight, but the support, I think the backup of the support was paramount. And it goes back to what you said, the principles of play of that getting forward and support. And I think I think the Waratahs just didn't have an answer for that from a defensive perspective.
No.
And it was
that was two different teams. I watched that game and I actually tweeted about it. One person liked it. I was a bit disappointed, and he was my mate as well. But that was watching two different teams. Like the Waratahs were slow to set up. They were just trying to bend the line and win gain line and win collisions and all this kind of stuff that we hear. That it's just not good rugby. It doesn't look good. It's not going to bring in fans, and the players, like, man, I wouldn't want to play a style like that. Whereas the Reds are attack the middle, go forward. If you break the line, we're going to the other sideline. If you break the line, you're going to have someone left or right for that offload. And 1 year I really focused on offloads. I'll never not have a team that offloads. It's the first thing I actually coach before I coach principles of play. After I coach principles of play, sorry. But when you look at a team that offloads, if you get, I kept data on when I was head coach in 2018 for the Irish, and it was the last time the Irish won the championship. Just putting it out there. I kept stats on offloads throughout the whole year, and what I found for offloads for us was if we got double figure offloads in a half, we'd win the game. So and some games, obviously it's club, so it's, you got a bit more space, a bit more time. But in games where we were getting 20 offloads in a game, we'd smash them. And then in phases of play, if we strung 2 or more offloads together, we'd score tries. because it's like you said, Harrison. The Waratahs couldn't handle that offload game. Once you break the line, you offload once, your defensive structures are blown up, and you have to start again. But you gotta tackle that guy off the ball first. If that player offloads the second time, you're in trouble now. Like, and back to the principles of play, it's support, continuity, apply pressure, score points. So you've applied a ton of pressure just with 2 offloads there, and chances of you scoring points are pretty high.
Yeah, and it's stringing that continuity. And I think Chris and I had that similar philosophy at Lindsayans. With we wanted them to offload, but then also ruck speed as well was a big one for us. We were after 3-second rucks or less. I think that adds to that continuity.
100%.
So that I think, I think that really defenses just can't do it. Just aren't able to deal with that. I think the other thing that I've kind of picked up listening to the episodes on the podcast, this is the whole episode today is a bit of a fangirl moment, a bit of a fan. Was listen to all the coaches, and I think what's quite refreshing for a lot of them is that even you touched on it today, is that they've admitted that they've made mistakes within their journey. I think it was good for them to come onto the podcast and showcase that vulnerability. But have you, in terms of like your mistakes of coaching? You don't have to admit to any if you don't want to.
No, happy to. I've made so many. Have
you listened to something you picked up from a podcast and directly applied that into your setting, and it's just not worked, or have you? Because I know that a lot of coaches will listen to something, and a lot of people listen to podcasts now, and they'll go and directly apply what they hear straight away, and it doesn't always work in their context. Has those kind of things happened?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the same as watching rugby as well. A lot of people will watch international rugby and go, "Oh, that's sweet. We're gonna roll that out this week." I remember, it would have been, well, when was it? It was 2011 Rugby World Cup, I think, where the All Blacks won against France in the final. Should have been the other way around, but we won't go into that. But there was the try by Tony Woodcock, where it was 2 pods of 6, they split, throw to the back. Woodcock came around, pierced the middle, scored. The following, the next time I played school rugby against a team, I think it was in a final too. The opposition ran that line out 3 times. It didn't work 3 times. And the reason why it didn't work was the hooker couldn't throw to the back lifting pod couldn't lift, and the jumper couldn't jump. And so that's a perfect example of, like, that doesn't apply. You can't just copy paste that into your setting. And and I've done the same for sure. There was when I talked with Dave Vessels after the interview, he talked about some of the ways that he was with the Force at that time, how they were running their sessions, and that it was kind of a tactical periodization model where they'd spend a minute and a half in attack. They get a 30-second water break, then they go into defense for a minute and a half, and they bounce around that. They'd have a set piece, and just constantly chopping and changing. I'm like, that's awesome. That makes so much sense. I'm doing it this afternoon. And it was just a total gong show, because I was the only coach. And so I didn't have my exercise scientist with the earpiece telling me this person needs to pick it up, or this person's blowing up. I didn't have 3 assistant coaches to manage the group. And so I took a bit away from it and said, okay, we can do this, but we can't do it in like almost like identical to a game situation. And then the players were rattled. So definitely always making mistakes. And you know what, the one I remember last season with the Montreal Irish, I think I put a big emphasis on discipline for one particular game. We were away again, and I was on the sideline, wasn't playing. So I was helping my team by doing that. I remember I just had one of those days. They pop up every now and then, less so than they used to, where the ref and I just were not enjoying each other's company.
With that, Evan Harrison.
Anyhow, so I actually went against my principles and what I said to the players we need to do to win this game. Fortunately, we won it, but on Tuesday night at practice, the following Tuesday, I apologized to the team, said, look, this is not good enough. I said this, you you trusted me and I didn't perform, so I'm going to get better. And that night I got an email from one of the players, and he said to me, I've been playing for 20 years. I've never had a coach apologize to me. I'm like, holy crap, like 20 years of playing sport and no one's ever said like they did the wrong thing. So again, going back to what we talked about, it's powerful, but you just got to be ready to make mistakes and know that you're going to do them. And then if you have to apologize. You don't want to apologize for everything, but that's, you do that at home. Segue. But yeah, you've got to be vulnerable and you've got to be ready to admit, hey, yep, we got that wrong. We're going to do it this way.
It's an interesting point that you were saying about the line out still, because there's a few things from the Masters where they've said that coaches are like magpies. They just go and find the shiny things and just try and take it to that context. It doesn't work. And then there's also the one about, and I put it into the questions tube earlier about are you the cook or the chef? And sort of that, and the cooks follow the recipe and go out and deliver it, because they don't fully understand who they've got and then what they're actually delivering. That message doesn't always get across as it maybe should.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with regards to the line out, like often, it's probably not just a Canada thing, but any club coach, often you're doing it all by yourself. You're the only coach there. So often you get put into these situations where you actually don't know anything about it. Like the line out's a perfect example for me. So I was fortunate enough to foresee that coming. And I interviewed someone on the podcast, Scott Allen. He's an Aussie guy. And he was a Wallaroos coach for a while. And what I got from that was just do a 4-man line out, run a 4-man line out. It's very hard to defend. It's super easy for the players to understand. And if you know nothing about lineouts, it's really easy to coach, because you've taken away a bunch of players and all you're focusing on is jump, lift, throw. So yeah, I think knowing what you're trying to cook is important, and knowing what your skill set is. So if it's attack, defense, turnover, ball, backs, pretty comfortable that I've got the ingredients and I can make that recipe pretty cool. I've got to assess my team profile, all that kind of stuff. But then when you get out of your wheelhouse, if you don't have that extra support, just really simplifying it and dumbing it down and finding those resources that you can trust is important, but also a challenge.
I think that's an important point, because I think there's often a bit of a stigma attached to being a so-called cook, in terms of taking resources that a governing body might put out, especially within the academic world of sports coaching. However, I think when you're a dad who's coaching under 7s, under 8s for the first time, that's the time to be a cook, and that's the time we discussed is to make those mistakes, try these things, and actually going on that journey and finding out, simplifying some of the most complex. Like as coaches, we can make rugby the most complex sport in the world if we really wanted to. But like prime example there, let's simplify it, and actually those cooks can then begin to blossom as their own coaches. It's about I think for me, it's about applying whatever recipe that you might pick up from different resources to your players, and it goes back once again to fundamentally understanding who you're dealing with and why they're there. And what's their level, and I think that links everything quite nicely together. Yeah,
100%. Coaching's hard too, and if you're a new coach, it's nerve-wracking, it's daunting, and if you don't have any teaching experience, where do you start? So, yeah, sometimes a simple copy paste for those first few sessions is good, but then you've got to really start challenging yourself and start forming your own coaching philosophy. The part of the coaching course that you're always like, oh, really? We're talking about coaching philosophy? Usually it's pretty dry and boring, but the more I coach, the more important it is for me that I have that, rusted on, and that I'm able to change it, but I'm able to fall back on it as well.
One of the things Dicko spoke about as well, wasn't it, Harrison? He mentioned how all community coaches actually probably have the hardest job in the world, because they're all performance coaches, because there's every parent on the sideline thinks that they can do it better than you. When actually, if they've took the time to really understand the players and change the odd thing here and there to make it suitable for them, so that they're all having that high quality experience and that they're actually learning the key principles of play, and each player is getting better and coming back and enjoying themselves, then that's what we should really be judging ourselves on, and rather than just on what the result is on a match day. With age grade stuff, anyway.
That was for me. Sorry.
Just a general statement.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. You guys edit this, eh? Yeah, like I was just thinking then, like that's what I love about coaching in Canada, like especially at an age grade level. The parents, it's such a foreign sport to them, and the parents that do know the sport, I know them, so it's like a nice community like that. So that's one thing in the game that I've never really experienced. I had it a couple of times at rep level, but it was adult rep level, so it was like, okay, sorry, I'll talk to him and he can talk to you, but we're not having this conversation. And but I think that happened twice in 12, 13 years of coaching. I've never had any parental pressure to do something a certain way or put someone on, and that was never an issue anyhow. They all get game time, but yeah. So when I hear that, I just think, that sucks the fun out of coaching, having someone's dad or mum just over your shoulder. And don't get me wrong, like it happens in hockey here in Canada, well, big time, because that's a sport they know and love. But yeah, I've been fortunate enough to avoid a lot of that.
There's one of the interviews to touch on. I heard when you're on the Magic Academy with Rusty, and like you said earlier, he was in your basement there for that interview. And he asked you what your top 5 were. This point I wasn't on it, but we'll gloss over that fact. But you said
you were 6. I think you were coming in number 6.
I was
with a bullet.
Someone's bitter. Someone's bitter.
I didn't hear that, Harris. What'd you say?
Someone's bitter.
To be fair, the top 5 were pretty good. You've got Lanny, Cheika, Eddie Jones, Rusty himself, and then Richard Cheetham was one. And I've heard Richard talk quite a lot. And for those that don't know, he's a senior fellow at the University of Winchester, and he's got some really good sort of content on sort of that non-conventional environment and how we can get people to learn creativity, I suppose. What was the biggest thing about that interview with Rich that you took, and then how did you actually apply it?
Yeah, I think just the way he thinks and looks at coaching environments, that's ideal for me. I hate doing things like, I hate doing the same session over and over. Like, even if it's a game that I've done and I did it 3 weeks ago, I'm like, I need to change it. Like, so that was a massive light bulb moment for me. The first big takeaway for me for that was just the amount of hours that we have with the athletes in just warm-ups and cool downs alone, and how most of the time we're just like, put some cones out, 15 minutes, guys, and then come back and see me. And we're just blowing an opportunity to really upskill our players and to, as a coach, get better at making creative situations. So that was a big one for me. I started stealing some of his ideas. He had one called the Bangkok Traffic Jam, where you've got everyone with a rugby ball in 2 hands. They're in a tight area. And they've just got to jog around and sidestep and not crash into each other. And then you can give people jobs. Okay, you're a truck. You're gonna just barge your way through, and you're a police car. You're whatever, and just gives you a chance to just mess around in a pretty safe environment because it's a warm up. And the players love it, man. They're smiling, they're laughing. So not only are they enjoying the session, but they're also bonding with each other. They're getting tighter as a group. So I then blew that up to every session. I would have a new warm up. No warm up would look the same. I'd often ask my daughters when I picked them up from school, "What did you do in phys ed today?" And they'd explain the game for me, and I'll go, "Okay, I'm doing that tonight with my guys." And then they'd ask me, "Oh, how did it go, Dad? Was it good?" And so it was a good little strategy to steal some information, but bond with my kids as well. And I've had, like, I did a montage of our last season, And I had some videos of, I just went nuts with the GoPro and had it going all the time. And I had some videos of the guys playing European handball with 7 different balls and a goal, and a winger and a hooker arguing whether he was over the line or not. And we had a balloon relay race where you had to blow up a balloon, run. You had to run, blowing up a balloon, get back, and the first team to let their balloons go all together won. And like grown men just giggling like children. And it was just awesome. So I wouldn't have done any of that stuff if I hadn't interviewed Richard. And so he's a master at this, super humble guy too. Yeah. And and just then the other big thing for me was just the element of fun. Like, you know, stop it with the crazy seriousness, and that we've got to be technical and tactical all the time. Yes, it's super important, don't get me wrong. I will, at a senior level, I want to win games and I want to prep my team well so that we're in the best position to do that. But we can also do it. There's time for serious work and there's time for fun work. And I think finding those little moments throughout the session is really important. So they were the 2 big takeaways for me.
That's sort of what Christy Charples, who's our first guest with the barefaced condition, he does his S&C, and he does some work with Blackburn ladies, and he sort of said that the warm-up is a perfect opportunity for us to, one, set the tone of the session, but then also it's one that we neglect as coaches to actually coach.
Oh, I used to do it all the time. Yeah. And by setting the tone, I as soon as I hear that, I think the tone is fun. Like that's the tone I want to set up. When they come and they see like a little trampoline in the middle of the field, a bunch of cones and all these different balls laid out, they're turning up going, okay, what's Andy up to now? And so they're getting fired up, and they're curious to find out what's going to happen in the warm up. So yeah, setting the tone is important.
Oh, like who's he interviewed this week?
Yeah, exactly. No, they're all millennials. They don't listen to podcasts. They get it beamed into a microchip or something like that. They don't listen to pods.
Well, I think what was interesting there was the word curious. I think sessions like that, I think, often actually have more profound impact on the players, because it spikes that curiosity within the players. And I think that actually forms greater questions, and they're more likely to come to me, as I know from my experiences, they're more likely to come to me as a coach and ask the why, and that's when we can get into that nitty-gritty, and that's probably where it leads on to a more of a technical and tactical discussion, because we've had a bit of fun. There's curiosity spiked, and that creates thought-provoking questions. So I think that was a nice little word there. I think, Chris and I's experiences of being on the Masters, I think one of the big things for me was Bob Muir's planning and reflective framework, and how we can link coaching behaviour and session design together. And I think it links quite nicely into Richard Cheetham's work in creating that fun atmosphere. And actually, both of them are on a spectrum, whether in terms of coaching behavior, we could be problem setting or problem solving. We don't have to be one or the other for the whole session.
Yeah.
And actually, moving up and down that continuum, and I think it is a continuum, we can actually create better learning moments for our players. In terms of that idea of philosophy of problem solving and problem setting, how have you kind of, how's that kind of influenced you as a coach and your session design and coaching behaviors?
Yeah, I think because with the podcast, it's like drinking from a fire hose with all this content and information, and yeah, like I going back to Nick Winkelman's one about external, internal cues and using analogies and things like that. I'll do that a lot, and I think that's really important because the science shows that it's effective. But there's other times where sometimes an athlete just needs to be told what to do. And I've had experiences like that on courses and coaching courses, and you never get a freaking answer. And at some point, we've got to shut it down, and we've got to give that athlete the answer if they can't get it, because that's part of our job. We can't do it all the time, but so knowing that playing group and knowing the individual, some people will love the questioning, others tight head props. don't like it that much, and just want to know what you want them to do. Sometimes you can't let them off all the time, but working around that's important as well. And yeah, sometimes it's just like, half time, for example, is a perfect example where I'm going to do a lot of the talking and on what I've seen, but I'm going to give you time to break off into groups and do some problem solving kind of stuff there. But a lot of it, that's me as a coach. That's my time as a coach where I'm going to be talking. Other times though, with my high school group, in the last high school game I played, it was a final. I didn't talk to them at halftime. They were in such a good position, and we were a strong team, so I didn't really have to. That there's a picture of me where the whole group's huddling at halftime, and I'm standing over here with my assistant coach, and we're just eavesdropping. So yeah, just knowing your group and knowing what works and what doesn't for them is key there.
I think there's been some really good content there that coaches can actually take into the practice, and what's really good is it links in really well to what we spoke about in the first few episodes around understanding the who, understanding the what, and then sort of now we're starting to look at how we can actually deliver that into practice. So it's really great to have you on, Andy, and chat about that stuff. As always, similar to yours, you end with the same 4 questions. We end with the same questions. So Harrison's going to give you. I'll hand over to Harrison, and he can explain.
All right, let's do it.
So it's the same format we've done for our first 2 guests. So I'll give you 3 players. We'll go with 3 Australian legends.
Nice.
We just need justifications. So we'll ask for justifications for this. On who you're going to make captain, who you're going to drop, who you're going to put on the bench, and then who you're dropping from the squad completely. And it's they're going to be tough.
This is the most nervous I've been for the whole interview.
So the first player we've got is George Gregan.
Oof, yeah. Okay.
David Pocock.
Oof,
and Lottie Takiri. They're your 3.
Oh, okay. This is I'm not just going to phone this in. I need to think about this because there's reputations at stake here, mine especially. Not that I'm too worried about that. Oh, geez. Okay, I'm gonna say Poey for captain. Outside of George Smith, I'm disappointed you didn't choose George Smith. I think he's the greatest player, greatest forward to have played the game for Australia. I want him on for 80 minutes, and I want him talking. If depending on the referee too, because the refs love him. They love him. He's the mild manner, left-leaning, socially responsible guy. So I want him in the refs' ear constantly. So he's my captain. Okay, so George Gregan. See, I'm hardwired for George Smith. George Gregan's coming off the bench. He's going to be there for the last 20 minutes. Just when the opposition are showing some cracks, some fragility mentally, especially, he's going to be there in their ear, letting them know what the score is, letting them know, how many years it'll be until they get another chance at a World Cup, which came back to bite us, sadly. So George is on there for his chirp. He'll also be working the chirp on the bench as well. Don't worry about that. And Lottie, I love Lottie, but I think the rugby league background, I'm gonna have to bench him for that. Not bench him, he's out, he's dropped.
He's gone.
But he's a key cog in the machinery from a social side. So getting the boys happy post game and celebrating, I think that'll be a role that I'll give to Lottie, and I think he'd relish in it.
I think that's three great answers there. I did, in my defence, George Smith was one of the first names I wrote down. However, I'm probably in a similar agreement to you of how highly I rate him, and I thought it'd be too easy.
Yeah,
I didn't want to go too easy on you.
Fair enough.
terms of picking George Smith, because he'd be one of the first. If I'm thinking of Australians, he'd want to be one of the first names on my team sheet.
Yeah, I've been guilty of when those Facebook kind of posts go around of who your best 15 rugby players are. I'll in the comments reply 1 through to 15 George Smith. So yeah, that would have been an easy one. That would have been a short segment.
Got a challenge. We've got a challenge. Put you in your comfort
nice.
zone. Get you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, perfect.
Andy, thanks again for taking time out today and coming on to chat to us. It's been a pleasure to have you on. I think there's lots of good content there that coaches will be able to sort of take and hopefully start to apply in the practice.
Right.
So
yeah. No, it's awesome. And it's awesome that you guys are doing this. I'm stalled at like episode 89. Last one I put out was July. So I'm kind of like Jeffrey Boycott, chipping away for my 100 really, really slowly. But I'll get there. But it's great that you guys are doing this content, and having it on YouTube's a different format and feel as well. And I think, any of this stuff that's out there for coaches to access is huge. So great job.
Cheers. So thanks for listening. Hope you've all enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers for listening. Don't forget to join in the discussion at Big Breakdown HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.